Hello and welcome back. This is the second in this series of project management principles videos. And in this particular video, we'll look at what exactly is a project lifecycle and why it makes sense to follow the project lifecycle methodology. Okay. Now, towards the end of the previous video, if you recall, I had spoken about progressive elaboration. So what I had said is that in the project, the clarity about the end product or service that you want to create, it does not exist in the beginning of the project. And what happens is it evolves over a period in time, as in when you gather more and more information from your surroundings, your stakeholders, and so on and so forth. Now, the project lifecycle method tries to ensure that at all points in time you are moving in the correct direction, you are creating the right product or right service that is expected to deliver the business value to the stakeholders. So what we do is we start with the conceptualization phase where we create a end deliverable. Now this deliverable is checked and given an approval, and then you move on to the next phase of the project, which is the design phase. Now, again, in design phase, you will try to create the design which is good for construction in the next phase. And here you are really determining the specification of the product of the project in concrete terms. Now, once the design is ready and you are now almost certain as to what you want to create in the project, you'll move on to the execution part. And in execution, you'll create the end deliverable, get it approved from the stakeholders, and then finish it, hand it over to the operations team, and your project is done. So essentially, if you really see in the project management, in the project lifecycle, what is happening is your product first exists in your vision. From the vision, it is thought through and moves onto a piece of paper where you are having all the designs, calculations, etc. available. From the paper, it moves to the reality, and eventually the end product is handed over to the end user. So clarity of scope emerges over the first two phases of concept and design, which is further executed, and you might encounter certain changes, but these are supposedly, hopefully, minimal in scope. So let's take an example of somebody trying to create a house. Now, what will happen is when you're trying to create the house, you don't want to reach at the end and then suddenly realize that you have not created the house that you were actually dreaming of. That's why in the project life cycle phases, we are going sequentially, trying to understand what is to be created and getting sign offs intermittently through the concept, design, execution, and finish phases. Together, these four phases are called as project life cycle. So what happens exactly is this. When you start with the project, you hire an architect who's going to conceptualize what the house is going to look like. And he creates a drawing or a 3D model and shows to the stakeholders, and he gets the approval from the stakeholders. Once this intermittent approval is given, you move on to the next phase. And this next phase is the design phase. Now here, the structural designer, he looks at the drawings that are created by the architect and then goes into each element of that drawing and designs it for construction. So for example, he'll design the foundations with all the proper sizing basis the load that the house is going to have. Similarly, he'll design the columns, he'll design the beams, he'll design the walls, windows, doors, etc., etc., etc. Now, he'll also have to take into account the standards and guidelines that are given by the regulators. For example, he might have to incorporate the fire and safety requirements within the house. Now, once these designs are done, they need to be approved by the local authorities. Once these authorities give a go ahead, the project moves on to the next stage, which is called as the execution. Now, here the drawings are taken and you start the construction. As the construction goes on, you keep on checking and rechecking whether you are actually creating the deliverable that you are expected to deliver at the end of the project. Once it is ready, you finish the project and hand over the house to the end user. So as you see here, at every phase end, you are giving a go ahead to the project. Now, this particular point where you are giving the go ahead to the team is called as the toll gate. And unless you get an approval, you can't move on to the next phase. Okay. Now, these points are also called as phase exit points because you may take a call to move on to the next phase. But at times, if the deliverable is not as it was expected to be, you could return back and do rework on the deliverable. And in rare incidences, you might even find that it is not really worth trying to create that deliverable, and you might call off the project itself. Then this point becomes what is called as the kill point. Okay. So why are we following the project lifecycle? Basic idea behind this is to ensure that you are creating the correct product or service. Now, vis-a-vis this, if you compare it to the project management processes, the focus of project management processes is to ensure that you are creating the deliverable correctly in the given time, in the given schedule, using the given resources, and so on and so forth. So this is more or less an engineering domain where you are conceptualizing, designing, executing, and finishing the product. It's not the management domain where you are looking over the creation of the deliverable. Now, I hope you have understood this particular concept of project lifecycle. It is a very important concept because we follow it everywhere. Even in normal day-to-day life, we follow the project lifecycle. For example, a person goes to a tailor to stitch a suit. First, he'll have to conceptualize what kind of suit he wants. Then the tailor takes his measurements, that is design. Then tailor executes that suit by cutting and stitching mock. And then he calls you for a trial and gives you the finished product at the end of this project. So why is the tailor doing it? He's also ensuring that the suit that is being created over the project is exactly what you dream it to be. Okay, now in the next video, we'll look at what are the project lifecycle characteristics and what are the different types of lifecycle people use depending on the product or service that is to be created. Thank you.